Sit back, relax, and welcome to Reading Hours. Today's book is Trust Me, I'm Lying by Ryan Holiday. Please let us know in the comments from where you are watching or if there is a book you want us to summarize in future. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a world most of us interact with every day but few truly understand. We're about to explore the dark underbelly of the internet, where news is manufactured, outrage is a commodity, and the truth is whatever gets the most clicks. We are diving headfirst into Trust Me, I'm Lying, Confessions of a Media Manipulator by Ryan Holiday. Published in 2012, this book is not a theoretical critique. It's a shocking confession. Before he became the best-selling Stoic philosopher we know today, Holiday was a self-described media manipulator, a professional liar paid by corporations and celebrities to orchestrate publicity stunts, plant false stories, and exploit the weaknesses of the online news ecosystem for profit. This book is his exposé of that system, a how-to guide that reveals the very tactics he used to deceive some of the biggest media outlets in the world. It's a controversial and deeply unsettling read because it argues that the entire system of online news is fundamentally broken. Driven by the relentless demand for traffic, page views, and ad revenue, blogs and major news sites have created a perverse incentive structure where speed trumps accuracy. Sensationalism beats substance, and the loudest, most outrageous voices get the most attention. Holiday shows us with startling clarity how this system is not just flawed but is actively being exploited by people like him. So, buckle up, because we are about to journey down the rabbit hole of manufactured reality, a place where lies become headlines and the clicks you give are the currency that powers it all. Our journey into the distorted world of modern media begins with Ryan Holiday's fundamental and terrifying thesis: the blog is the engine of the entire news ecosystem. What you ultimately read on the front page of CNN or the New York Times, or what you see discussed on television news, very often did not start there. It started on a small, obscure blog, a tiny spark of information or misinformation that was fanned into a raging fire. Holiday, speaking from his own first-hand experience as a media manipulator, explains that the internet has created a multi-layered media food chain. At the very bottom are the countless small, independent blogs. These are often run by a single person, driven by passion but also by the desperate need to generate content and traffic to survive. They have no budget for fact-checking, no time for deep investigation, and a massive incentive to publish anything that seems even remotely interesting or controversial. This is the entry point for a manipulator. Holiday reveals how he would feed these small blogs tips, rumors, and outright lies, often anonymously or through fake sources. He knew that these bloggers were not journalists in the traditional sense. They were curators and aggregators, constantly scanning the internet for something, anything, to post. The bar for entry was incredibly low. An anonymous email with a juicy but unverified rumor about one of his clients was often enough to get the ball rolling. The small blog would publish the story, often with a headline designed to provoke maximum curiosity and outrage. This initial post was the crucial first step. It didn't matter that the blog had a tiny readership. What mattered was that the story was now on the record. It existed. It had a URL it could be linked to. This is the genesis of so much of what we now call fake news. It's not created in the newsrooms of major networks. It's born in the digital petri dish of the blogosphere, where the pressure to publish is immense, and the standards for verification are virtually non-existent. Holiday confesses to doing this repeatedly, planting stories for his clients that were designed to create a specific narrative, whether it was making a controversial author seem more popular than he was or making a fashion brand appear edgy and rebellious. The small blogs were his unwitting accomplices, the first domino in a long and carefully planned chain reaction. Once the story was live on a small blog, the next step was to trade it up the chain. This is the core mechanic of media manipulation. Holiday explains that the next level up in the food chain are the medium-sized blogs and websites, sites like Gawker at the time, BuzzFeed, or the Huffington Post. These sites have larger staffs and bigger audiences, but they operate under the same fundamental economic pressure, the relentless need for page views. Their writers and editors are also constantly scanning the internet for stories, and a key source for them is the smaller blogs. When they see a story starting to get a little bit of attention on a smaller site, they face a choice. They could spend time and resources trying to independently verify the story, or they could simply link to the original post and write their own version of it, often with an even more sensational headline. More often than not, they choose the latter. The logic is simple and cynical. If the story turns out to be false, they can always blame the original source. They are not reporting a fact, they are reporting on the conversation. This allows them to get the traffic from the sensational story without taking on the full responsibility for its accuracy. Holiday reveals how he would actively facilitate this process. After planting a story on a small blog, he would then send tips to the writers at these larger sites, pointing them to the original post. He would frame it as, "Hey, did you see what so-and-so blog is reporting?" This created a feedback loop. The medium-sized blog would write about the story, linking back to the small blog, which would give the small blog a huge boost in traffic and credibility. Now, the story wasn't just on one obscure site, it was on a well-known platform. It had momentum. It looked legitimate. This is how a lie begins its journey to becoming perceived as truth. It's a cynical game of telephone, where each new telling adds a layer of undeserved credibility, all fueled by the insatiable hunger for clicks. As the manufactured story climbs the media food chain, it enters a new and more dangerous phase. The initial rumor, planted on a small blog and then amplified by a larger one, now has enough perceived legitimacy to attract the attention of the mainstream media. This includes established newspapers, wire services, and television news networks. Ryan Holiday explains that, contrary to popular belief, These institutions are not immune to the pressures of the digital age. They too are competing for eyeballs, and they too are constantly monitoring the blogosphere to see what is trending. When a story is blowing up on sites like BuzzFeed or Gawker, an editor at a traditional news outlet faces a difficult decision. They are under pressure to cover what people are talking about online. If they ignore a viral story, they risk looking out of touch and losing traffic to their more agile online competitors. So even here, the temptation to report on the story without full verification is immense. The calculus becomes, once again, about reporting on the conversation. The headline might read, "Gawker reports controversial rumor about CEO," or "Social media erupts over alleged scandal." This is a subtle but crucial distinction. They are not reporting that the rumor is true, they are reporting that the rumor exists and is causing a stir. But to the average reader, this distinction is often lost. They see the story on a trusted news source, and they assume it must be true. This is the moment when the manipulator's lie officially crosses over into the mainstream consciousness. Holiday details how he would watch this happen with a kind of cynical glee. A rumor he had invented in his apartment would, within 24 hours, be the subject of a segment on a cable news show. Journalists would be calling his clients for comment. The fake story had become real news. This entire process is fueled by what Holliday calls the economics of the internet. The business model of most online publications is based on advertising, and advertising rates are tied to the number of page views a site receives. This creates a relentless, all-consuming pressure to generate traffic. Every writer, every editor, every publisher is judged by one primary metric: how many clicks did your story get? This system inevitably rewards the wrong kind of content. Thoughtful, nuanced, and deeply reported journalism is time-consuming and expensive to produce, and it often does not generate the same kind of viral traffic as a short, sensational, and emotionally manipulative story. As a result, newsrooms are incentivized to prioritize speed over accuracy and quantity over quality. The goal is to be the first to post about a trending topic, to capture that initial wave of traffic. Fact-checking becomes a luxury that many outlets feel they can no longer afford. Holliday argues that this is not because journalists are bad people, but because they are trapped in a broken system. They are forced to churn out multiple posts a day, to write provocative headlines, and to focus on topics that are likely to go viral, regardless of their actual importance. This creates a media environment that is perfectly ripe for exploitation. A manipulator doesn't have to be particularly clever or sophisticated. They just have to understand this one simple rule: anything that generates clicks is valuable, and the truth is, at best, a secondary concern. Holliday's confessions are a damning indictment of this system. He shows how he was able to play the game better than the journalists themselves, using their own economic incentives against them to spread his clients' messages, no matter how false or manipulative they were. One of the most powerful and insidious tools in the media manipulator's arsenal is the ability to create and control controversy. Ryan Holiday dedicates a significant portion of his confession to explaining how he would deliberately provoke outrage as a marketing strategy. The logic is chillingly simple. The internet runs on emotion, and the most powerful and shareable emotion is anger. A story that makes people angry is far more likely to be clicked on, commented on, and shared than a story that makes them feel neutral or even happy. Holiday learned to weaponize this dynamic. For his clients, who often included the controversial author Tucker Max and the provocative clothing brand American Apparel, the goal was not to be liked. It was to be talked about. Any publicity, even negative publicity, was good publicity because it drove traffic and sales. Holiday reveals the step-by-step process for manufacturing a fake controversy. It would often start with a deliberately provocative act. For example, he might have American Apparel run an ad that was designed to be perceived as sexist or exploitative. Then, he would leak this ad to a specific type of blog, a feminist blog or a social justice blog that he knew would be outraged by it. He would essentially hand them the ammunition to attack his own client. The blog would, predictably, write a scathing post about the ad, calling for a boycott and generating a storm of angry comments. This was the first phase of the plan. The next step was to take that initial wave of outrage and amplify it. Holiday would then leak the story of the outrage to a different set of blogs, often ones with a conservative or anti-political correctness leaning. The headline would be something like, "Feminist bloggers attack American Apparel over harmless ad." This would trigger a counter-reaction. These blogs would defend American Apparel, mock the outrage culture of their opponents, and generate their own wave of comments and shares. Suddenly, Holiday had created a full-blown culture war, with his client's brand right at the center of it. He had two opposing sides fighting a pitched battle online, and every angry blog post, every tweet, every Facebook comment was free advertising for his client. The mainstream media would then pick up on the story, not as an ad campaign, but as a genuine social controversy. They would write articles about the debate surrounding the ad, often inviting representatives from both sides to argue on television. Holiday had successfully turned a marketing campaign into a national news story, all by playing on the predictable and easily manipulated outrage of different online communities. He confesses that this tactic was incredibly effective. It generated massive amounts of free publicity and often led to a significant increase in sales. It is a deeply cynical view of the world, one that sees public discourse not as a search for truth, but as a series of emotional triggers to be pulled for commercial gain. It reveals a media ecosystem that is not just susceptible to manipulation, but one that actively rewards it. The angrier we get, the more we click, and the more we click, the more money the manipulators and the media outlets make. Beyond manufacturing outrage, Ryan Holiday pulls back the curtain on another dark art of media manipulation, the deliberate distortion of information on platforms we are taught to trust. A prime target for him was Wikipedia. We think of Wikipedia as a neutral, crowd-sourced encyclopedia, a repository of objective facts. Holiday reveals that it is, in fact, a key battleground for public relations professionals and media manipulators. Because Wikipedia pages rank so highly in Google search results, controlling the content on a client's page is incredibly valuable. It is often the first and only source of information that people will consult. Holiday confesses to spending countless hours editing the Wikipedia pages of his clients and their competitors. He would subtly rephrase sentences to cast his clients in a more positive light. He would add citations from the very blog posts that he had planted, creating a circular and self-verifying loop of misinformation. A lie he started on a small blog would now be cited as a fact on a trusted Wikipedia page. He would also engage in a form of digital vandalism, inserting negative or embarrassing, but true, information onto the pages of his clients' rivals. He understood the intricate rules and politics of Wikipedia's volunteer editor community and learned how to make his edits in a way that was unlikely to be reverted. He would create sock puppet accounts, multiple fake identities that he would use to agree with his own edits, creating the illusion of a consensus. This is a slow, patient, and insidious form of manipulation. It's not about creating a single viral story, but about gradually shaping the public's understanding of a person or a brand over time. It is a corruption of what is supposed to be a public good, turning a collaborative search for truth into a tool for private gain. This manipulation extends to the very headlines we read. Holiday explains that in the world of online media, the headline is everything. A huge percentage of people will read the headline of an article, but will never actually click through to read the content. This means that the headline itself becomes the story. As a result, blogs and news sites have become masters of writing headlines that are optimized for clicks, often at the expense of accuracy. They use techniques like the curiosity gap, where the headline teases you with a piece of information, but forces you to click to find out the answer, e.g., "You'll never believe what this CEO did next." They also use outrage and fear, writing headlines that are designed to trigger a strong emotional response. Holiday argues that this has fundamentally changed the nature of news consumption. We are no longer reading articles, we are reacting to headlines. The nuances, the context, the counter-arguments that might be contained in the body of the article are lost. All that remains is the initial, emotional jolt of the headline. As a manipulator, Holiday exploited this ruthlessly. He would often feed bloggers not just a story, but the exact headline he wanted them to use. He knew that if he could control the headline, he could control the narrative, even if the content of the article was more balanced. He also understood the power of iteration. A blog would often publish a story with one headline, and if it wasn't getting enough traffic, they would change it, trying out different, more provocative versions until they found one that went viral. This is a /B testing for news, a process that inevitably filters for the most sensational and often the most misleading version of a story. It is a system that has turned the craft of headline writing from an art of summarization into a science of psychological manipulation. The consequences of this broken media system are not just abstract or academic. Ryan Holiday makes it painfully clear that this kind of manipulation has real-world victims. The relentless pursuit of clicks and the casual disregard for the truth can destroy lives, ruin reputations, and inflict immense and lasting pain. Holiday tells the story of Andrew Breitbart, the controversial conservative media figure, and his tragic confrontation with a woman named Shirley Sherrod. Breitbart's website published a deceptively edited video clip that made it appear as if Sherrod, a Black employee of the Department of Agriculture, was delivering a racist speech. The clip was taken completely out of context. In reality, her speech was a message of racial reconciliation, but the edited clip was explosive. It was perfectly designed to generate outrage and go viral. The blogosphere and the mainstream media pounced on the story without bothering to watch the full video or to get Sherrod's side of the story. The pressure was so intense that the White House fired her within hours. It was only later, after her life had been turned upside down, that the full, unedited video emerged and the truth came out. She was offered her job back, but the damage was done. Her name had been dragged through the mud, and she had become a pawn in a cynical political game. Holiday presents this not as an isolated incident, but as a predictable and inevitable outcome of a media system that prioritizes speed and sensationalism over all else. The bloggers who first spread the story were not evil. They were simply doing what the system incentivized them to do: publish first, ask questions later. They were rewarded with a massive amount of traffic for their role in destroying an innocent woman's reputation. Holiday also confesses to his own role in this kind of destructive behavior, albeit on a smaller scale. He talks about planting negative stories about the competitors of his clients, knowing that these stories could harm their businesses and their personal lives. He admits to a sense of detachment from the consequences of his actions, seeing it all as a game. But the book is, in many ways, an act of atonement, a recognition of the real human cost of his work. He argues that we, the consumers of media, are also complicit in this system. Every time we click on a sensational headline, every time we share an article without reading it, every time we participate in a mob of online outrage, we are feeding the beast. We are providing the economic incentive for the media to continue to behave this way. We are creating the demand that the manipulators are so eager to supply. The book is a stark warning that the casual way in which we consume information online has profound ethical implications. The news is not a harmless diversion. It is a powerful force that shapes our understanding of the world and has the power to do immense good or immense harm. When we treat it as cheap, disposable entertainment, we are contributing to a culture of misinformation and cruelty. The story of Shirley Sherrod is a chilling reminder of what is at stake. In the race for clicks, the first casualty is always the truth, and the second is often the life of an innocent person caught in the crossfire. As we venture deeper into the anatomy of media manipulation, Ryan Holiday unpacks the psychological principles that make this entire system work. He wasn't just throwing ideas at the wall to see what stuck. He was leveraging well-understood cognitive biases to guide public perception. One of the most powerful of these is the confirmation bias. This is our natural tendency to seek out, interpret, and remember information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. Holiday knew that the most effective way to get a story to spread was to tailor it to a specific ideological tribe. If he wanted to spread a negative rumor about a liberal politician, he wouldn't send it to the New York Times. He would send it to a network of conservative blogs. He knew their audience was already primed to believe the worst about that person, and they would eagerly share the story without applying much critical scrutiny. The story confirmed what they already thought they knew, and that was a deeply satisfying experience. He would do the same thing in reverse, feeding anti-corporate stories to left-leaning blogs. He understood that the internet is not a single public square, but a collection of echo chambers. By feeding these echo chambers what they wanted to hear, he could guarantee that his message would be amplified. This is a far more effective strategy than trying to convince someone of a new idea. It's about taking their existing biases and using them as a vehicle for his client's message. It's a form of psychological jujitsu, using the momentum of people's own beliefs to move them in the direction he wanted. This is why the online world has become so polarized. The economic incentives of the media system encourage the creation of content that caters to specific ideological niches, reinforcing our biases and making it harder for us to find common ground. Another key psychological principle is the bandwagon effect, our tendency to do or believe things because many other people do or believe the same. In the online world, this is turbocharged by social proof. When we see that a story has thousands of shares, likes, and comments, we are more likely to assume that it is important and credible. Holiday would actively manipulate these signals of social proof. He would use bots or paid services to generate fake social media engagement on a story he had planted. He would instruct his own network of contacts to share the story at the same time, creating a sudden and artificial surge of activity. This would trigger the algorithms of social media platforms, which are designed to promote content that is trending. The platform would then show the story to a wider audience, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. The story would become popular because it looked popular. This is a way of tricking both the algorithms and the users into paying attention. It is a common tactic used not just by PR professionals, but by political campaigns, foreign governments, and anyone else who wants to manipulate public opinion. It preys on our cognitive shortcut of trusting the wisdom of the crowd. The problem is that online, the crowd can be faked. Holiday's confessions reveal that much of what appears to be a grassroots, organic conversation online is, in fact, the result of a carefully orchestrated and well-funded campaign of manipulation. He shows us that we cannot trust the metrics of online popularity as a proxy for truth. or importance. They are just another part of the game, another lever to be pulled by those who know how the system works. The structure of online media itself creates vulnerabilities that manipulators like Ryan Holiday are all too eager to exploit. One of the most significant of these is what he calls iterative journalism. In the old world of print media, a story was a finished product. A reporter would investigate, write, and edit, and then the newspaper would be printed. If there was a mistake, a retraction would have to be issued the next day. In the online world, a story is never finished. It is a living document that can be updated in real time. This has some advantages, but it also creates a perverse incentive. It allows blogs and news sites to publish a story first and verify it later. Their primary goal is to get the story online as quickly as possible to capture the initial wave of search traffic and social media shares. They can publish a story based on a single, unverified source, and then gradually update it as more information comes in. They might add a developing tag to the story to cover themselves, but the initial, often inaccurate version of the story is what gets seen by the most people. The updates and corrections are seen by a much smaller audience. Holiday describes how he would use this to his advantage. He would feed a blogger a sensational but incomplete version of a story. The blogger, eager for the traffic, would publish it immediately. By the time the full context was available and the story was updated to be more accurate, the initial manipulative narrative had already taken hold. The damage was done. The lie had already traveled around the world while the truth was still putting on its shoes. This process is further exacerbated by the way information is aggregated. A site like Google News or an RSS reader will often only show the initial version of a story, not the subsequent corrections. This means that the first draft of history, which is often the most inaccurate, is the one that gets preserved and distributed. This dynamic is part of a larger problem, the de-skilling of the journalism profession. In the rush to churn out content and feed the insatiable appetite of the internet, the traditional skills of journalism, deep sourcing, fact-checking, careful editing have been devalued. Many online writers are not trained as journalists. They are young, they are underpaid, and they are judged not on the quality of their reporting, but on their ability to generate page views. They are, as Holiday describes them, glorified secretaries, whose job is to repackage information that they find elsewhere online. They are often not given the time or the resources to do real reporting. This creates a media environment that is incredibly susceptible to manipulation. A skilled manipulator can essentially do the writer's job for them. Holiday would often send bloggers not just a tip, but a fully written post, complete with a catchy headline, pull quotes, and images. He was making it as easy as possible for them to say yes. All they had to do was copy and paste. This is a far cry from the old model of a skeptical reporter grilling a source. In this new world, the reporter and the source are often collaborators, working together to create a piece of content that will get the most clicks. Holiday is not just criticizing these individual writers, He is indicting a system that has set them up to fail. He argues that we have created a media economy that is no longer able to support the kind of journalism that a healthy democracy needs. Instead, we have a system that rewards the cheapest, fastest, and most sensational content, creating a fertile ground for lies to flourish. Ryan Holiday's confessions serve as a powerful case study in how the lines between public relations, marketing, and news have become hopelessly blurred. In the past, there was a clearer distinction. Advertising was what you paid for, and public relations was about earning media coverage through genuine newsworthiness. Holiday argues that in the online world, this distinction has collapsed. He describes his work not as PR, but as a form of unpaid advertising. By planting stories and manufacturing controversies, he was able to generate massive amounts of media coverage for his clients that they did not have to pay for. This coverage was often far more valuable than traditional advertising because it came with the implicit endorsement of the media outlet that was covering it. It looked like news, not marketing. This is the holy grail for any brand, to have your message delivered to the public through a trusted, third-party source. Holiday reveals that this is no longer a matter of luck or genuine merit. It is a science that can be engineered. He essentially hacked the media, turning journalists into an unpaid extension of his marketing department. He did this by understanding their needs better than they did. He knew they needed a constant stream of content, that they were desperate for stories that would generate traffic, and that they were susceptible to flattery and exclusive leaks. He provided them with exactly what they wanted, and in return, they provided him with the platform to spread his clients' messages. This blurring of lines is also evident in the rise of stunt journalism and celebrity journalism. Holiday details his work with Tucker Max, an author whose entire brand was built on being a lovable asshole. To promote Max's books and movies, Holiday orchestrated a series of public stunts designed to generate media coverage. They would deface their own billboards, create fake protest groups to boycott their own movie, and leak stories about Max's outrageous behavior. None of it was real, but it was all designed to be a great story. The media, particularly the gossip and entertainment blogs, ate it up. They were not interested in the truth, they were interested in a good narrative. Tucker Max was a character, and they were happy to report on his latest antics, even if they suspected they were being manipulated. This is because the media has become as much a part of the entertainment industry as it is a part of the information industry. The goal is to capture and hold an audience's attention, and a good story is the best way to do that. The truth is often messy, complicated, and boring. A well-crafted lie, on the other hand, can be simple, exciting, and emotionally resonant. Holiday's work is a testament to the power of narrative over facts. He was not just a media manipulator, he was a storyteller, and he learned that in the modern media environment, the person who tells the best story wins, regardless of whether or not it is true. This has profound implications for how we understand the world. If we cannot distinguish between news and entertainment, between genuine events and manufactured stunts, then we lose our ability to make informed decisions about our lives and our society. As we approach the end of Holliday's confession, it's crucial to understand the symbiotic and often parasitic relationship between the old media and the new. While it's easy to blame the blogs for the decline in journalistic standards, Holliday argues that the mainstream media is just as culpable. In fact, they often depend on the blogs to do their dirty work. The blogs serve as a kind of farm system for stories. They can take risks, publish unverified rumors, and engage in the kind of sensationalism that a more established brand might shy away from. The mainstream media can then watch to see what gets traction in the blogosphere. If a story goes viral, they can then swoop in and cover it, but with a layer of plausible deniability. They can frame their coverage as being about the online conversation or the latest internet controversy. This allows them to benefit from the traffic generated by the sensational story without having to be the ones to break the initial, often ethically dubious, report. Holliday calls this leading from behind. The mainstream media pretends to be above the fray, but in reality, they are following the lead of the most irresponsible actors in the system. This creates a feedback loop where the worst instincts of the blogosphere are amplified and legitimized by the established media. A lie that starts on a fringe blog can, through this process, end up as a topic of discussion on a national news broadcast. The entire ecosystem becomes a machine for laundering misinformation, stripping it of its original, untrustworthy source and giving it the imprimatur of a respected media brand. This dynamic has also led to a fundamental shift in the power structure of the media. In the past, a few powerful editors at major newspapers and television networks acted as the gatekeepers of information. They decided what was news and what was not. Today, the power is much more diffuse. A single blogger, a YouTuber, or even an anonymous Twitter account can have a massive impact on the public conversation. But this diffusion of power has not necessarily led to a more democratic or truthful media environment. Instead, it has created a more chaotic and easily manipulated one. The old gatekeepers, for all their faults, did adhere to a certain set of professional and ethical standards. In the new, decentralized media landscape, there are no gatekeepers. There are no rules. The only thing that matters is attention. And as Holliday has shown us, attention can be bought, faked, and manipulated. He argues that this is a dangerous state of affairs. When there are no trusted arbiters of truth, when every source is equally suspect, it becomes impossible for us to have a shared understanding of reality. We retreat into our ideological tribes. We consume only the information that confirms our biases, and we lose the ability to engage in reasoned debate. This is the ultimate and most terrifying consequence of the system that Holliday describes. It is not just about the decline of journalism, it is about the erosion of the very possibility of a shared public truth. And in a world without truth, everything is permissible. In the final analysis, trust me, I'm Lying is a deeply pessimistic book, but it is not without a glimmer of hope. That hope lies not in a reform of the media system, which Holiday seems to believe is irredeemably broken, but in a reform of ourselves, the consumers of media. The entire manipulative enterprise that he describes is predicated on our predictable and exploitable behaviors. It works because we are drawn to outrage, because we are suckers for a good story, because we click on sensational headlines, and because we share things without thinking. If we were to change these behaviors, the entire system would begin to crumble. The power to fix the problem, Holiday suggests, lies in our own hands. We must become more discerning and more disciplined consumers of information. This means, first and foremost, slowing down. The media ecosystem is designed to encourage impulsive and emotional reactions. We must resist this. Before we share an article, we should read it carefully. We should ask ourselves who the source is. We should consider the author's potential biases and motivations. We should, in short, think before we click. This also means actively seeking out a more balanced and diverse media diet. If we only consume information from sources that confirm our existing beliefs, we are living in an echo chamber. We must make a conscious effort to read and listen to voices from outside our own ideological tribe, even and especially when we disagree with them. This is not about abandoning our own principles, but about cultivating a more nuanced and complete understanding of the world. It is about developing the kind of intellectual humility that is the hallmark of a wise and well-informed citizen. Holiday also suggests that we should be willing to pay for high-quality journalism. The reason the media is so reliant on a broken, click-based business model is that we have become accustomed to getting our news for free. If we want better journalism that is deeply reported, carefully fact-checked, and free from the pressures of sensationalism, we must be willing to support it financially. This means subscribing to reputable newspapers and magazines, both in print and online. It means donating to non-profit news organizations. It is a way of voting with our wallets for the kind of media that we want to exist. Ultimately, the book is a call to action. It is a challenge to each of us to take more responsibility for the information that we consume and share. We cannot simply be passive recipients of media. We must be active and critical participants. We must be the fact-checkers, the gatekeepers, the guardians of our own minds. This is a difficult and demanding task. It requires a level of vigilance and self-awareness that is not easy to maintain. But as Holiday's chilling confessions make clear, the alternative is far worse. The alternative is a world where truth is a commodity, where public discourse is a game of manipulation, and where we are all just unwitting pawns in someone else's marketing campaign. The choice is ours. We can continue to feed the beast, or we can decide to starve it. In conclusion, trust me, I'm Lying is a profoundly unsettling and essential book for anyone who wants to understand the modern world. Ryan Holiday's brutally honest confession serves as a damning indictment of a digital media ecosystem that is driven by perverse incentives and is ripe for exploitation. He reveals that what we often perceive as news is, in fact, the result of a carefully orchestrated campaign of manipulation designed to generate clicks, provoke outrage, and serve the commercial interests of a hidden class of professional liars. The book's impact has been to shine a harsh light on the dark underbelly of the internet, forcing a much-needed conversation about media ethics, the economics of online journalism, and our own responsibilities as consumers of information. Years after its publication, its message has only become more urgent. In an era of fake news, political polarization, and algorithmic manipulation, Holliday's exposé is not just a historical account. It is a field guide to the present, a warning that the reality we perceive through our screens is often a carefully constructed illusion. It is a powerful and necessary reminder that in a world saturated with information, our most valuable asset is our own critical judgment.